Hey, it's 7 o'clock. I'd like to call to order this Monday, September 9th, 2024 meeting of the City of Beaver Dam's Common Council meeting. Please note that Nathan will be doing the clerking, and so he will be calling the roll in a moment.
Okay, Anderson,
Here.
Appenfeld. Here. Bonnet.
Here.
Burnett. Bree.
Here.
Fisher.
Here.
Kylie.
Here.
Keel. Here. Mark.
Here.
Olson.
Present.
Perkins.
Here.
Wild.
Here.
Yutz.
Here.
Zop.
Here.
Please let the record show 13 of the 14 alderpersons are here. Kevin Burnett is excused for a county board meeting. Please stand now and pledge in a silent deliberation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, at this time, we offer a informal public hearing for anyone in the audience or online that has an issue and a question for the council that is not on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone online that would like to address the council? Is there anyone online or in person? An issue. Could you say your name and address, please? I see a telephone number, but. Okay, I'll ask one more time. If there's anyone that would like to speak to the council on an issue that's not on the agenda for this evening, now is your time to ask that question. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to announcements. Did you have any announcements? Okay. Yeah, Convention Pepperfest is on Saturday. I think it starts at 11. 9 already? Okay, thank you. And there's, I know there's a band in the afternoon from 2 to 4. It's always a good time to get out and enjoy some Beaver Dam peppers. Any other announcements from anyone? Okay. So moving on to disposition of minutes. You have the minutes from the August 19th meeting in front of you. Is there any additions or corrections to those minutes? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion.
Alder Hiley makes the motion and Alder Yudz
I'll
seconds.
second that.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Any abstentions? One abstention, Alder Burnett. Okay. We'll move on to the city administrator's report and keep you busy.
I am good. I have nothing to report this evening.
Okay. We did get your update via email this week. Thank you for that. Well, Mr. Clerk, is there any communications?
There are no communications this evening.
All right. Well, we do have some ordinances. So if you would like to read ordinance 15-2024.
Yep, so ordinance number 15-24 or 2024, an ordinance providing for the direct annexation of property in the town of Trenton to the city of Beaver Dam, Dodge County, Wisconsin. This is the first reading.
Okay, since that's the first reading, there's no discussion this evening. There'll be a second reading next Monday on September 16th. Move on to ordinance number 16-2024.
Ordinance 16-2024, an ordinance establishing zoning designations for annexed properties. This also is a first reading.
And likewise, this will be brought up as a second reading at the September 16th meeting. So we'll move on to discussion and possible action. This discussion regarding the failed ordinance number 6 and maybe what next steps we should take. I'm going to turn it over to Larry. Did you get everything hooked up? Good deal.
Okay, well, I didn't have an answer for you when we took the vote the other day because I had to think through what happened with a failed majority vote. So the vote of the group was 7-5 in favor of adopting the ordinance with the changes that were discussed over a number of meetings and then some at our last meeting. You'll see in your packet, the version of this ordinance it reflects what I believe was adopted for changes prior to that vote. And I actually had to do some research with the league and others to figure out whether or not the non-charter portions of the ordinance had passed, but just the charter ordinance portions had failed, because remember, you need a 2/3 vote to pass a charter ordinance change. The near consensus of the people I asked was that nothing passed because it was sort of a highest common denominator question. And so since it wasn't a 2/3 vote, we sit where we started the day with no changes to those ordinances. So I asked for an opportunity to bring this back to you now and talk about and get some feedback as to what the next step should be. And the reason why it isn't something that we can just let go is because there's a lot of changes to the ordinances that have to happen. Right now, the ordinances are inconsistent with the practices that are being used because we now have a city administrator. It's a different budgeting process. A lot of things in the ordinances are different. We don't have a description of the city administrator's duties in the ordinances. We need to have that. And for a number of other reasons, there's a lot of cleanup that was in this ordinance. So there's a couple of different approaches we can take. We can separate these ordinances into charter and non-charter, and reflecting these changes, bring them back to the council for further action and discussion. One of the things that I talked with the mayor and the city administrator about was it might be helpful if I opened up a window to, let's say, 2 weeks to hear from all of you as to what you'd like to see with respect to the changes that were proposed in this ordinance, to see if we can come up with a way to move forward to a majority. And so we're interested in hearing your thoughts on that. Before that, though, I think it's important, and I know that you've heard presentations from Attorney Zock, and we've talked about this for a long time, but it seems to me that we're a little bit stuck on what a city administrator does versus we used to have a director of administration, right? And a city administrator is sort of the flow chart of the organization of the city, reports directly to the council and to the mayor, and is the administrator of all of the departments, with the exception of police and fire, which is under the PFC, library, which is under the library board, versus a director of administration, which is really just another department head. And in the case of Beaver Dam, was generally seen as the person who would be the finance director and also sort of the coordinator in some ways, between the council and the staff, the employees. It seems to me that the council is really struggling with a transition from what is basically, and Nathan put it best when I was talking to him, the director of administration is sort of the mayor's chief of staff. You had a situation where you had a powerful mayor, in other words, a full-time mayor who was really in charge of the day-to-day business of the city. And before my time, before Nathan's time, before Mike was mayor, this council decided to move from a full-time, more powerful mayor to a part-time mayor who really would use the part-time appointment for more of the figurehead sort of functions and some of the high-level administration. And to change to a city administrator who would really be the person administering the day-to-day business of the city. There's been, we all, I think, can recognize that with some folks, there's some reluctance to move to that, to continue that change through to its fruition, as was started again before my time. And because this didn't work, I don't know if there's some tweaks we need to do, some changes. Not everybody's gonna like everything in an ordinance like this, obviously. But do you want us to take additional feedback? Have some more dialogue about how to address this? Or, is this council really in a place where you're really looking for a director of administration and not a city administrator? Because I think some of the decisions that you made along the way were more consistent with that chief of staff under a mayor role versus the city administrator who reports directly to the council and the mayor and administers the rest of the business of the city. But as I said, in my opinion, you don't get off the hook with a failed 2/3 vote, because we have quite a few things in the ordinance that we still need to clarify. If we're going to continue with the city administrator, we need to have a role defined. And I think there's quite a few holes that need to be filled at this point. So ideas. We'll open the floor for ideas. I do think that, again, I offer to sort of accept input over the next few weeks and see if we can come up with some middle ground that we can bring back in a revised version of these ordinances. No matter what we do next time, we're gonna do it in 2 different votes for at least so we don't have the confusion of the 2/3 vote. So there will be 2 ordinances to review, but I'm interested in other people's thoughts, or if either of you have any thoughts to kick us off.
I'll start out with Alder Fisher.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I had a question for Nate concerning his August 23rd letter on city administrator transition and interim proposal. I read that with interest. There were some things in there that I didn't quite understand, and I wanted to give him an opportunity to please clarify that letter, both pages.
Is that relevant to the ordinance? Yeah. Go ahead.
So, after, we had met the last Monday, there continue to be some claims, of my role, and, my sincere interest to, see the city move forward with, the administrator position. And, it seems like, my desire in sending this communication was to see the community move forward, and not to see me in the way of that. Having said that, I want to be very clear that in suggesting a role as interim, I want to have more of a role in leading the discussion and helping you kind of walk through the kind of the next steps and setting up the framework. And so those go hand in hand. So the real question is, the intent was to establish trust, where you're not viewing me as having an agenda, but viewing me as someone that really wants to see you guys get this across the finish line and be in a good place. And base your decisions not on emotion, but on strong reason for setting up a framework for a city administrator, not just today, but well into the future. And so it was my attempt to try to kind of say, hey, if we're starting at ground zero, if we need to start fresh, this is one approach. And I wanted to offer that as a suggestion. Having talked with Larry and having talked with Mike, I think they're of the opinion that we don't need to start over. We don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater per se. But at the same time, I don't want to be in your way. I know what I'm capable of. I know that I'm a good expert as far as a city administrator. I think that as a community, we're new. There's a bit of new ground, new territory that's being forged, and this is newer for you all than it is for me. I've dealt with city administration for quite some time. And so if I can help with that, I want to. I feel that my ability to help in this conversation has been somewhat inhibited by the perceived, what my perceived motivations are. And so I wanted to neutralize that.
Frank?
Don't I have the floor here?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Things in that I looked at, we all recognize that it is difficult for this position, meaning the city administrator, to help facilitate the transition without being perceived.
Can you turn your mic on? Your microphone is not on.
I'm sorry, should I repeat that?
Yeah, you
Okay.
probably should. There's people online.
Part of this letter that was written on August 23rd stated, we all recognize that it is difficult for the position, which is the city administrator, to help facilitate the transition without being perceived as a conflict of interest. I perceive that as a conflict of interest, having a current city administrator who is requested to become an interim, and also stating, upon completion of the objectives, should I desire to be the city administrator, I would need to reapply. So the way I read this is, a couple paragraphs up, he said, you are saying, Nate, that it is difficult for you to aid us in this transition without being perceived as a conflict of interest, which I agree on. The bullet point number 3 underneath that paragraph states, prepare a contract that will both protect the city and attract a candidate at the desired experience level, and then re-advertise the city administrator position. We haven't talked about a contract, and I get a feeling, Nate, that that's where you're headed. We do not have a contract for city employees. We have a contract for outside services, such as Mr. Moosereiner. But when it comes to the city department heads, they don't have an employment contract. And I'm dead set against giving a employment contract to any city administrator or financial advisor, whatever the title may be. So I am going to suggest that we postpone definitely any future discussion on ordinance 6-24 until the first council meeting in December, which is December 2nd. This will give us time to review our alternatives, to work on the upcoming 2025 city budget, and above all, to have a full-time, part-time elected mayor rather than a mayor that's been appointed by the council. So I will move that we definitely move until December 2nd to discuss this in open council meeting again.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second to that motion?
I would second that.
Who said that? Nancy?
Nancy.
Alder Wild, second. Writing it down, clerk. Thank you. Sorry. Okay, so some of that fits a little bit into what Larry said about wanting to do some one-on-ones and offering to speak to each of you independently with your ideas. I don't think the time frame is quite as good. The other thing that's a little bit deterring on that is the fact that it's been probably 3 or 4 months since we wanted to have a review of our current administrator, which we do annually. So we're suggesting to push that back. We could still do the review. Okay. Well, we could do the review with an executive committee, if that's acceptable. You want to comment on it? Alder Uppenfeld?
Do we have an executive committee if we do not pass this charter?
That's
No,
what,
we don't have an executive committee, but as was, the executive committee was really built or proposed to mirror the group of people the mayor put together last year to review the city administrator, which was the 2 committee chairs and the council president. So you could use that. You could expand it to 2 more people. You can do, but just because we don't have a committee for them doesn't mean you can't do a review.
Alder Wild?
Yes, just had a question. Since I'm new, how did the specifications for this position get put together? Who did that? And how can we work on that if that's going to be part of our
That-
discussion?
That was part of the ordinance that failed. There was a job description provided in the materials the city sent out in requesting interested candidates. But that's all we have at this point. The job description itself was in the ordinance that failed last meeting. So that is part of what we need to, that's one of the holes that we need at some point to fill as a city.
But we are working on what's already existing to refine it, not doing it all over.
That's one option, is to work with what was in the ordinance that we
Thank-
voted on last week, 2 weeks ago, and then take it from there. Yeah. But that is where we were going to, how we were moving forward to create the definition of the role of that particular employee.
Can I just chime in? I wasn't here when you guys created the job description. But as I understand, Alder Wild, as I understand it, GovHR came and there were discussions had, a job description was created. That's how they advertised it. And there was a discussion whether or not to get the ordinance in play prior to an administrator coming on board. And the discussion that was had was we would prefer to have the person who's going to be the administrator have some input on that ordinance. It's a little ironic that now here we sit and we don't want that input, and that's fine. I'm not arguing against that. But needless to say, however things move forward, it could be a lot less sloppy.
It's a first effort. New position.
Right, and just to back up a little bit, when I was on the council in 2002, 2003, in that area, it was very spoken of many times to have a city administrator versus having a full-time mayor. The definite huge benefit is by having a part-time mayor and a full-time city administrator, you have someone who is knowledgeable, that's trained, that's gone to college for to do finance and hiring and firing and all the things that we ask the city administrator to do. If you go by popular vote of a mayor, which is how they get elected, you don't always get somebody who's qualified to run a city, if you want to put it that way. So that was the thoughts back then. And current council is that's why it was voted that way. Alder Anderson?
I believe we have a motion on the floor and everything should pertain to that at this point.
Okay,
If that fails, then we can go back to regular discussion, which I will ask more questions. But I think December is too long to wait. We should do it sooner rather than later, just to that point.
okay. Alder Zock?
What do I have to do to get recognized?
Sorry.
I am really puzzled by what we're doing here. This is the kind of discussion that was held 3 years ago, when the council deliberated on making that change and the advocacy of that change by the existing mayor, Becky. And the deliberations of seeking applicants, going through the process, and hiring somebody who then said, Yahoo, I got a job. I'm moving my family to another community. So they start, and all of a sudden, a year or so into it, there's been a performance review. Expectations were outlined of the administrator. And were reported to the council. And we continued on. Now, for whatever reason, we're debating the concept of a city administrator. We've been talking about this for 6 months. What are we doing? And it would be like if a community member, let's say that we do what we just said we're going to do with a motion. We're not going to do anything until December when we're going to define it. So a community member comes up to me and says, Joe, what's the deal with a city administrator? And I would say, I guess there's performance issues. And they'd say, well, what are they? I would say, I don't know. But you voted on it. You voted not to give that person a contract. I'd say, yeah, that's what the council decided. I'm just perplexed. We should have voted on this 2 months ago, 4 months ago, and 6 months ago. And now, and I'm sorry I wasn't here at the last meeting, not that I would have made a difference, but the issue of 2/3 vote and 1/3 vote, why aren't we today voting on that, what was presented, the ordinance and the non-ordinance tonight, and put that behind us? And if there's anything left over, let's postpone it and do it. But the talk again and again, it makes no sense to me. So, I mean, I apologize for the soapbox, but it's like we do the same thing every meeting. We talk about it, a few people talk, and we postpone. This is our pattern. And if I lose the vote, okay, but let's vote and move on. We got budget coming up, we got strategic planning coming up, we got all this stuff, and we're diddling around with something that should have been done 3 years ago and wasn't. And shame on us. And that's not an advocacy of one or the other. It's just let's get this over with. So I'm sorry, that's it.
Okay, your opinion's appreciated.
We're on the motion, we're
Yep.
not on the main topic.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that was relevant.
So, we don't have in front of us an ordinance to adopt tonight. We're looking for direction tonight on how you want us to bring it to you, since the methods that we proposed before didn't work. So we can't vote tonight. In my research, even a motion to reconsider at this point would be inappropriate because the matter wasn't held over from the last meeting. It would have had to have been done at the last meeting. So we don't have anything to vote on tonight. The contract, just to everyone's understanding, there were discussions of contract both before Nathan started in this position and since. And, you know, there have been discussions about what would be in contract, and a lot of progress was made on that, but that didn't, the council has never been presented with a contract for a vote as of yet.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. Is there any other comments on the motion? Hold it
I would
up.
like to just keep moving this. I think we're close, so I would vote no on the motion to postpone. I think we're close and we just need to tweak, or maybe people have thought of it some more. I think we all kind of got caught off guard about the 2/3. So I think we're a lot closer on what I think is a good compromise in hand, or very close to a compromise ordinance in hand already. So I would vote no.
Yes, Frank.
Think this applies, but you can tell me if it doesn't. I like the thought of Larry offering up explanation. I just didn't know if there's anything you can say briefly tonight that clarifies the charter, non-charter portions or not.
I can do that. I think that we can probably take the vote on the timing question, you know, that was presented, and then we can talk more about that clarification.
Okay, any other discussion on the motion on the floor? Seeing none, we'll call the roll.
Anderson, Appenfelt,
No,
Bonnet,
No.
Burnett, oh, sorry, Free,
No.
Fisher,
Yes.
Hiley,
No.
Keel,
No.
Mark,
no,
Olson,
No.
Perkins,
No.
Wild,
Yes,
Yutz,
Aye.
Zap.
No.
Okay, the noes have it. The motion's been defeated.
Yeah, and so now I can talk a little bit about the charter versus non-charter. So if you look at the ordinance, I think it starts on page 40. Well, let me just look here. Page 40 of your packet for tonight. The section 1 provisions, you see on this first page underlined in all caps, it says section 1. Those provisions are currently in the charter ordinance. Okay? One of the things you're going to see, no matter what you decide, when the next time this comes to you, the changes to section 2-401 on the bottom of page 41. That we will be presenting that, assuming that's where we land, with just removing that section and putting the city administrator in a different number. That was one of the things we're not proposing to put anything in, at this point, to put anything in a charter ordinance. The way that the ordinance was drafted was everything, all these provisions were coming out of the charter ordinance and just becoming regular ordinances.
Larry, can I have you explain what a charter ordinance is? We got some newer elders.
Yep, and the charter ordinance is just an ordinance that either to get put in or changed requires a 2/3 vote. That's really all it boils down to. It's just and a non-charter is just a regular ordinance that requires a majority vote.
And there's a little bit more nuance to it too as well. Do you want to go into that
I
detail?
mean, about the referendum?
Well, what the purpose or the role of a charter
Yeah,
ordinance
you go
is.
ahead.
So when a community incorporates, they set their structure. And generally speaking, you would set the structure in the charter ordinance, and it's meant to be something of the like the Constitution, right? It's not meant to change. very routinely. And so they put higher protocols on it, having the 2/3, and then should it pass 2/3, there is even an opportunity for community comment that could require, if there's enough public concern over it, could require it to go to referendum. But the intent But again, the intent of the charter ordinance is to act somewhat like a constitution of the city.
Right, so for example, you see the current committee structures are in a charter ordinance. And that's something that's come up even in my short time with the city, a number of times that we wanted to tweak an assignment for a committee or who the designees were for the committee. That's something that, in my opinion, needs to be more flexible than, like Nathan says, almost a city constitution. So at the very least, whatever we propose moving forward, the description of the city administrator functions will not be proposed in a charter ordinance unless you tell us to do that. And it won't be replacing a charter ordinance section. So you can say, as you look through, if people are going to provide me their comments, section 1 is charter ordinances, section 2, which starts on page 43, you'll see section 2 underlined in all caps. Everything after that point are just general ordinances that we were tweaking to recognize that there's this new role. Other than the budget, that was mostly just cleanup of fitting that role, that person into the functioning of the city. So any more questions on charter versus non-charter? And again, if people are going to be providing their comments about what tweaks we need to do, and if there's something you want preserved in a charter ordinance or something that if you want to differentiate based on those points, it would be appreciated.
Oh,
Alder Anderson?
Larry, would it be possible, going through all this makes me kind of appreciate that maybe we should protect the higher level function in a charter. Like, we have an executive committee, we have an administrative committee, we have these committees, but then that's it in the charter. And then the roles and the details, the more flexible parts are in general. Is that something that's possible to have, like the hierarchy of our structure in a charter, but then roles and duties defined elsewhere, or is that?
Yeah, we could do that. And those are the kinds of comments that we're looking for. I'll give you an example. If you look on page 41 of your materials, the administrative committee, it says it's a 7-member committee with city administrator reporting. And it provides the roles of that committee. Same thing with the operations committee. It says the director of engineering and the director of utilities are the reporting officers. If you ever wanted to change those, that's in a charter ordinance. You have to go through this process of a 2/3 vote, potential referendum. It's delayed in terms of its applicability. Those are the reasons to not have it in a charter ordinance. It's not that you can't change it. It's just, it's cemented in a little bit more. You got to get a jackhammer out instead of just, sweeping it away. So if you do end up creating an executive committee, which the majority of this council did agree to do before the failed vote on the whole, and if you wanted to change the makeup of that committee, you'd have to go through a charter ordinance change to do that if you're going to put those in charter ordinances. So, in my opinion, all of that is appropriate to be in just a general majority ordinance. But if the council wants to further solidify some of those pieces, they're welcome to do it.
Another question for clarification on the charter. So we have what's in front of us that's currently in the charter, but there's other elements that are in the charter that aren't here. Is that correct? Is it just the one?
I
or
think
is it-
there's very few. The only other one that I'm aware of is the method of voting. If you have more than one person in a primary, which is an appropriate thing.
More than two.
If you have more than two
Yeah.
in a primary, That's the only one I can recall off the top of my head that's also in a charter. And that to me seems like something that's fairly appropriate to have in a charter order.
Okay. So
And
we,
that's very basic structural, how do we convene ourselves as a group kind of question.
so we do have a charter category, whether we put things into it or take them out, but did you have a question?
Yeah, so I guess I'm just a little confused. So you said starting on page 40 where it says section 1. That's
it-
charter ordinance right now.
Yeah,
Everything-
Roman numeral 1
Yeah,
to help.
Roman numeral
Right.
1. But then there's section 2-4.
That's a charter ordinance now.
Okay, so if we keep going down,
Everything in that section, Roman numeral 1, are current charter ordinances.
so that would continue on till
Bottom of 43, where it says section 2 in Roman numerals.
cause I don't. There isn't a section 2. Oh,
Look, it's on the
43.
screen now,
No.
Ken.
I guess, yeah. That section I would like to remain as a charter ordinance, specifically to have the 2/3. And my argument goes for the exact reasons why you guys are saying, like, it should be a foundation, it shouldn't be easily changed. And it does kind of set like the new structure of the city. And if you want it for longevity, so it doesn't change as mayors change, you'd want it at 2/3, otherwise someone could come in and, I mean, my big concern is the hiring and firing. That we would allow the city administrator to do under section 2-4, number 2-4. As it's written, I'm fine with, but. You know, down the line, if someone's like, oh, we need to let him hire and fire everyone, he doesn't like Jeremy for some reason, let's let him fire him for whatever reason.
Well, then we can fire him.
Yeah.
You know, that's
Well,
it works both
after-
ways.
But the point is, that's after the fact you already lost someone, they could already be suing the city for unlawful termination. So if someone wanted to, he's like, not Nate, but the city administrator says, I really need these powers to fire people. They could convince, 7 people on the council to grant them those powers. Whereas if it's 2/3, it's more, there should be more of a hurdle to pass to change something. As strong as that. And
That's fine.
that's just my feeling. The section 1, I guess the committees make sense to throw in there too, but, and again, it's not that it can never change. It's just a higher threshold to make the change.
Mhm.
But I would agree, yeah, and then everything else past that could be a regular ordinance.
Yeah.
But that's just my feeling that, yeah, the section 1 should just remain a charter ordinance.
Yeah, I agree with a lot that you said there, Ken. So in light to, we had a couple of good suggestions come up already for Larry. And he wants to communicate with all of you. Would you, I mean, we could talk about this for 12 more hours and not get anywhere because we don't have it in our agenda to vote. So the one thing we can vote on is what you want to do next. Does someone want to make, I don't know if I can ask for a motion.
Yeah.
Okay, we don't need it.
Yeah, so are people feeling like if we go till 2 weeks from today, just reach out, phone call, email? I've got your comment now. What do you think about that in terms of, then the 3 of us can sit down and say, okay, what all did I hear? For example, we've got one suggestion right now, which is to leave 2-4 as a charter ordinance and just modify it in the manner that the council already voted on. Leave that in a charter ordinance, and put the other things that are slated for removal from the charter status into a general ordinance category. We can take suggestions like that, and then bring back to you and just say, here's what we heard, and here's what we think might be a good compromise.
Aldermark.
Just to be clear, it would have to be next Monday, correct? Because this meeting was delayed a week because of Labor Day. So our next council meeting is next Monday and the
Or-
following Monday is our budget meeting. So it would have to be for not
No,
2
it would
weeks.
be
it
the
would be-
first meeting in October.
Oh, in October.
Yeah,
Okay. I
because
thought you-
if we're
okay.
gonna have some time for people to give feedback, then we've got to compile it and get it on an agenda the Thursday before the Monday. Otherwise we'd only have 3 days.
Okay.
We'd have till this Thursday to do this whole thing.
Thanks for clarifying. Alder Anderson?
I'm actually fine with that because we've had tons of discussions, as Joe brought up. I would be fine with, yeah, solidifying it for Monday, next Monday, the 16th at our regular meeting. I mean,
The one point of clarification is that because it would be a new ordinance, it still needs to be published. It still needs to have a first and a second reading. So it's not like we can just take 0-2024 and reconsider it. So it's not possible to do it next Monday.
Not to have it enacted and be done with it, right?
well, no, but we could have a first reading, couldn't we?
Yeah, I, unless everyone would commit to getting me their comments by close of business tomorrow, we wouldn't have time to do it for the agenda on.
Alright.
Yeah, we typically do have our agenda meeting on Tuesday. Yes,
I just have one comment. And I think this is a great idea that we can go to you, Larry, and give you our suggestions and things like that. But I have a question for the previous meeting is I thought we kind of were all in agreement. I know some people didn't like one thing and others didn't like another, but I thought we were all pretty close. And then it came to a 7-5 vote. So I'd like to hear, or I hope you guys talk to Larry about what you didn't like, because I was floored. And I could tell Larry was a little like, what just happened? Like, that's why I walked out of here, the first one out of here. I was like, what did we just do for 2.5 hours? So I'm curious to know what happened. I thought we were all on the same page, maybe not on the same page, but we were okay with everything. And then that happened. Joe, your comment was great. I think that was a great way to put it. My 2 cents, I think, getting Larry ideas is great. And my final comment is, I think we need to have this set. We've been working on it for so long. Let's give Nathan a description of his duties and let him do his job. That's all I have.
Alder Haley?
I will gladly comment of my no vote. I don't feel this ordinance puts us in a city administrator position. I think it leaves us in the past in a mayoral position. Looking at other ordinances and cities and communities, I truly felt we're still not there. And my no vote was because I felt we were strictly looking at a mayoral position. We're not giving the city administrator their due justice of what they are capable of doing and what they are hired for this city to do. Looking at a few things, the hiring and firing should be done by the city administrator. That is perfectly well within their realms and job description. The other thing that I disliked was the line items of this meeting with each department head, line item by line item. That was another portion that I didn't agree on. So I felt if I didn't agree with a couple sentences, then I was agreeable to none of it.
Good comments. Did you have something to add? One of you two? I thought I saw a hand. No? Okay. Yes, go ahead, Bonnet.
Unrelated to a specific here, but I wanted, and I wasn't here last time, but on the police and fire stuff, is that a charter ordinance?
Are you referring to the cities having granted
Well, I
alternative
tell you,
powers?
here's my concern on that. And I don't want to get us off track. Is we're giving the police chief all the power. There's really no role of the city council in the police side. And this isn't anything against the police side. But it's just a concept. And then, then they have a police and fire commission. So then the question is who appoints the police and fire commission? And does the council have a role in the appointment of the police and fire commission? So I guess I'm trying to just understand why we carved out police and fire from all the other stuff.
Yeah, and so.
Well, we don't want the administrator to hire and fire, but the police chief can.
Yeah, and so the section related to this is 2-402. It's at the top of page 43 of your packet. That does exist today as a charter ordinance. That was another one that I recommended. You'll see no changes proposed. The ordinance wording stays the same. We were just gonna pull it out of the charter and put it in the general ordinances, but with no changes. That's consistent with the authority that's been provided to the Police and Fire Commission. Police and Fire Commissioners are recommended by the mayor and approved by the city council.
But I would concur that it should not be charter as well. So,
And I don't believe there was anyone who disagreed with us
Okay.
on that point.
Everyone in agreement to running this off to the first meeting in October? In the meantime, as quickly as you can, hopefully this week, express your concerns to Larry. Any comments? Email him, phone him, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, you may as well call because I'm probably gonna have questions if you send me an email anyway, so.
Could I ask, so I think between Ken and I was looking for more of a scaled down keeping the charter, and Ken was more like, let's keep a lot more in charter. I mean, are other alders interested? I mean, what we saw 2 weeks ago was get rid of the charter completely. Like what we were voting on, there would be no more charter. And we've only heard from 2 alders saying, let's have a little bit of charter. Let's like executive committee, admin committee, operations committee, stop. Right? And then duties are in the general. I mean, and then Ken was saying we should keep everything in the charter. So before we send Larry off with the direction of 2 alders, I'm curious, what thoughts?
Oh,
Can I
Perkins?
make a suggestion? And I was gonna bring this up actually before, but figured I could just tell Larry. I like your thought process of having admin and operations committee just being charter, but then we have the duties non-charter. The executive committee maybe is one that we would stay charter. I feel like maybe that has a little bit more specific role. That would be my 2 piece on that. What's you guys' thoughts on that? Cause I do think like, there may be a case where the administrative committee has to deal with something different, that's not in here. I'm sure we already do that, but it just gives us more leeway, like Larry said.
Alder Anderson?
I think it's kind of all in one section.
I can separate it into 2 pieces.
Oh, you can.
Makes it easier, harder.
Scope, it might be.
Yeah, just
scope and
establish the
charter
committees
and
in
duties.
charter and then the duties are in our duties and assigned staff are in a general ordinance.
but is that just an
That-
academic thing? I mean,
Yeah.
what does it matter?
Yeah, to me, that's the same thing, cause you're not having the protection of having it be in the charter. Cause you can still have the title there, but then your duties you can change willy-nilly with a simple majority. So I don't think it would have the same protections as having it in charter.
Alder Mark?
Now,
I'm
Well,
sorry,
and,
Rita?
and the ordinance as it reads now for both of the committees says under the duties, it says any and all policy duties as assigned by the mayor. So that's as big of an elastic band as you can possibly have in terms of changing the duties of those committees.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's any, threat of those committees' duties being set in stone and not changed because of that last item. So I don't think it matters, I think the duties can stay in there as long as that last item is listed for both of them.
Okay. Alder Anderson, I'm sorry to let you finish.
no, I was just gonna say to go what Zach was saying, that instead of everything, I'd be fine with just section 2-4 and then section 2-46. Remaining charter ordinances. And then I guess all the rest could be just a regular ordinance,
And that's fine too.
cause that I think would get. I think that would handle the protections.
And because I need to avoid starting over as much as we are now, you may see a packet of ordinances. It might be ordinance for 2-4.
Yeah.
Separate ordinance for 2-46. Separate ordinance for administrator functions and duties, separate ordinance for changes to our budget process, because we've got to get as much of this behind us as we can.
Good point. Yes, Alderman Barnett.
Larry's point, I just want to clarify, and I appreciate that. So if you would do it in the way you just described, here's this issue, and this issue, and you bring it forth, and we talk about it, we're gonna vote,
Absolutely.
raise your right hand.
Well, and
Swear on the
Oh,
stack.
my left hand, oh,
to that question, by doing it in separate, if there's a couple issues that maybe keeps one of them from moving forward for some reason, we don't have to lose all the progress we've made. So you might see a handful of a cleanup sort of admin ordinance. Yeah, we'll have to talk internally about how best to do that.
So looking at a first ordinance reading on the first,
Right.
okay, the first Monday, that would be, I think that's.
And that doesn't mean we can't have a conversation about it as a council on the first Monday. But yeah, first reading, we'd be aiming for the first meeting in October, second reading, second meeting in October.
but,
That would be actually October 7th.
so from what was discussed last time, on that issue of having the department heads present their budget line by line to the council, is that something you're gonna address, or do you want input on that?
You do want everyone's input on it. I want everyone's input on anything they want us to address. But I suspect that we're going to do a budget ordinance separate from all this, the rest of this, so that when we get in here, we can take votes on what we want in, what we don't want in, and then move to approve as amended or not amended, and we move on.
Thank you.
So is it a consensus that we all get back to Larry in your free time? And we'll address this as a first reading on October 7th with a big packet of ordinances. Yes.
And just a question, you did say you'd rather have us call you than email? Is that your
Yeah,
preference?
either is fine if you think you've got a real discrete point, but some discussion will probably help to.
Okay.
I can carry that on to our 3-person team, and we can, as we formulate the ordinance that you'll see as our next starting point.
Okay, with that, then I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn. And Kevin's not here, so we need some help.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, Alder Hiley and
Second.
Alder Perkins, second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.